Welcome everybody who might be starting to arrive to the webinar, and we'll get started in a minute or so, just allowing people time to get in. Welcome everybody as you start to make your way into our virtual room. As you can probably see from the bottom of my little video, my name's Michelle and I'm one of the people speaking tonight, and I'm a lawyer with Your Story Disability Legal Support. I would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people. I'm on Wadawurrung land in Ballarat, and pay my respects on behalf of everybody to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to any First Nations people that are attending today. So I've just got a few sort of quick housekeeping announcements. I'll explain how the webinar is going to work, and then hopefully get into a really great discussion with Jenny and Joe. So I'll be chatting with Jenny and Joe, and also talking about my experiences of being a carer, also the Disability Royal Commission and National Carers Week, so which we're celebrating today. And then at the end, that'll be followed by a Q&A. So if you've got questions, we'll answer as many of them as we can. The webinar is being recorded, and it's also being live streamed to Your Story Disability Legal Support's Facebook page. We have Auslan, as you can see, and we also have captions that are available. So I'll explain the captions instructions now. If you go to the toolbar at the bottom of the screen and click on the button that is labeled CC Live Transcript, and then select Show Captions. If you're having any troubles, any tech issues, but other issues, please post them in the chat. And then for asking questions on Zoom, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. You can ask questions anonymously if you want to. On Facebook, you can post your questions in the comments if you're watching from there. If we don't get to your question, we will respond via email or Facebook, depending on how you're joining us today. If this webinar raises any concerns for you, free counselling is available, and that's by calling Blue Knot on 1800 421 468. And we'll also keep sharing that information in the chat and on Facebook. So my first guest is Dr. Joe Watson. Joe is a speech pathologist and a disability and inclusion expert who balances research projects and lecturing at Deakin University, while also supporting her mum and her sister, both of whom live with disability. Jenny Nguyen is a social worker, a carer for her younger brother, and a youth ambassador with Little Dreamers Australia. And a little bit about me. I am a Your Story lawyer, so that means I support Victorians to take part in the Disability Royal Commission. And I'm also a parent. I've got 4 children. One of them has a disability, and I've recently did my own submission to the Disability Royal Commission, talking about being his mum and his carer. So I'm going to ask this question of answer this question for myself, and then also ask Joe and Jenny. And the question is, how did you become a carer? And as you'll see, we've all got quite different experiences. So I became a carer when one of my children, my oldest son, was diagnosed with autism. And first and foremost, I do consider I am his mum, just like all my other kids. But it's taken me perhaps a while to appreciate this, but having a child with a disability does come with extra challenges. perhaps extra stresses. So I do, in that sense, consider myself a carer. Jo, how did you become a carer?
Well, I guess I sort of came to identify, as a carer. Probably wasn't until later in life. I have a sister with an intellectual disability who is also blind. And so I grew up with her, and just like you, Michelle, she was just my sister. And as we got a little older, I guess I, took on some of that caring role. But it wasn't until much later in life when my mum had a spinal cord injury, and she has quadriplegia now. So that made that put a bit of a spanner in the works, I guess. So I took on more of a role there, and I could. My caring role was probably with my sister was probably more before the NDIS. Although when the NDIS did start, I managed her plan, which I know many of you out there are managing plans, and it's a big deal. So once I'd said I can't do it anymore, yeah, I think her support team really stood up. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
And Jenny, how did you become a carer?
So I'm a carer for my younger brother, which was mentioned earlier. I became a carer when I was about 17 years old in year 11, basically when I was able to start driving on my own. Started off with school drop-offs and pickups and that morning routine, that bedtime routine, and de-escalation of like emotional moments for my brother. When I was in university, it extended to coordinating appointments, services, NDIS, just general healthcare. And so my experience is different as a sibling carer for a younger person, like a child. And I think, guess the path of what it's going to look like as a carer as my brother gets older will shift as well. So it changes over time. And particularly now that I'm working full time, it's been a work in process with working on negotiating boundaries and responsibilities within the family unit.
Thank you. And Jenny, has anything changed for you since you identified as a carer?
Yeah, so learning that I was a carer was quite a pivotal moment for me. It was basically that moment where I finally had the words and the understanding to begin to articulate my experience as a carer. I realized that, the difficulties that came with caring for my brother, that it wasn't just me, that I wasn't alone. And it really gave me a space to self-reflect in a way that was supportive and strengths-based, such as recognizing that, I was doing my best and that self-care is important. And it gave me the opportunity to connect with organizations such as Little Dreamers, which is for young carers, and Carer Gateway. And it's led me to opportunities such as being a youth ambassador as well as a carer representative. So something like this, I'm here today because I was able to identify as a carer and link in with those organizations. And so it's been a really amazing experience to draw on my lived experience and inform policy, provide education, and connect with other carers. So it's been a really positive thing to, not just for myself, but on a larger scale, to realize that I'm a carer.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jo, is there anything that you would like to add?
Just to reiterate what Jenny was saying, it's a very fluid process, isn't it? And for me, it's my caring has shifted in terms of other people in my family. When mum became quadriplegic, and and as time goes on, it changes all the time. So I think that's a really good point, Jenny.
I would agree. I mean, I would see or hope too that my role changes over time, as my son, becomes an adult, becomes more independent. Of course, I'll always be his mum, but I do see it shifting and changing. So another question for you, Jenny. The aim of National Carers Week is to raise awareness about the diversity of carers. What impact would you say your culture and your community have on you as a carer?
So much, in short. So I guess as a my experience as a carer is inherently shaped by the fact that my cultural background is Vietnamese. You know, my parents are migrants to Australia. They're non-English speaking background, and they have their own challenges in navigating the healthcare system, which is hard enough if you haven't got a language barrier. And they also have different understandings of health and cultural attitudes towards that. And so for me, it became very natural for me from quite a young age to step in as almost like a translator, interpreter, making sense of information. And I was doing that very, very young while I was still in school. And so I was doing that even before my brother was born. I used to get asked to like have a look at tax documents, even though I had no idea what tax was. And so I remember in navigating my brother, it had its challenges sometimes with that cultural background, because sometimes, especially with my brother, he has behavioral stuff going up, this notion that my parents had that boys will be boys, which isn't just a Vietnamese specific attitude, but it is shaped by cultural attitudes as well. Like it had its complexities in trying to challenge that. And I'm also the eldest daughter, and so there's a cultural norm with caring for your siblings, whether or not they have disabilities. So it's not even only just normalized, but it's like you get praise for doing that. And that's why for such a long time I thought, before I would realize I was a carer, I thought I wasn't doing good enough, because at times I would struggle. And so there's this also a very specific concept in Vietnamese culture called Nguyen, which kind of translates to this idea of, the best way I can explain it is that in Western cultures, when we're raising kids, we often teach them to share. And when you think of sharing, it's like 50-50. You have half, the other person has half, or we take turns. But in Vietnamese culture, when I was, for a lot of older siblings, as you're growing up, you're taught to Nguyen for your younger siblings, which means that, like, if I had a toy and my parents told me you should do that, it's like I should give it to my younger sibling. It's like, you have had a chance as an older sibling, you should give it up and be the bigger person and give them that opportunity. And I think that's a very like minute distinction, but shapes, really shapes who I am as a person, this idea of almost like sacrifice that's embedded in me. And so that definitely shapes my experience as a carer. Yeah.
Very eloquent. Thank you for such an answer. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Disability Royal Commission is, and then we'll talk about what it might mean to us. So the Disability Royal Commission basically wants to hear stories of mistreatment. So many ways, unfortunately, that people with disabilities can be mistreated across Australia, across all areas of life. And we see carers as really important storytellers in this process. And at Your Story Disability Legal Support, we can definitely support carers. So to provide legal information and legal advice when it's needed, to really, I guess, do everything to support people to take up this opportunity to share a story, but to do it in a way that suits them, suits their voice, and is safe. One of my children is inevitably going to come in. Mummy will talk to you later. Mummy is totally online. Please, Molly.
Me and Lydia are going to the car wash, just saying.
Okay, enjoy the car wash. Okay, totally online. Please, Molly. Okay, bye-bye now. They love being on camera.
They do.
Oh dear. Joe, save me. What does the Disability Royal Commission mean to you?
Oh, I love seeing it. What does it mean to me? Now, it's really interesting, because it wasn't until you asked me to do this webinar did I think about what it means to me, because you know, obviously I've been involved in it professionally, and you know, I work at Deakin in disability and inclusion, and I'm a speech pathologist by background. And so it's constantly been spoken about in my work life. But it wasn't until you asked me, Michelle, to be involved that I thought, oh, wow, it really is important in terms of my personal life. It's amazing the way that we do that, isn't it? That we compartmentalize our lives, I guess. And I'm sure a lot of people can speak to that who are listening. But what it means to me is an opportunity for people with disability, but to and people who know and love them, people like all of us here, to have their voices heard. I guess, again, it wasn't until I thought about tonight's webinar that I thought about my role in being able to tell my personal story, or my siblings, or my parents, or I've been thinking about how I can support my sister to tell her story, and I will be knocking on your door to get you help to get you to support her and help your story to support her in telling that story. But it's certainly something that I didn't really think until you'd asked me that it's something that we can tell our stories around, and I think that's really important. So yeah, look, yeah, it's my experience so far in terms of colleagues who have been part of the commission is that it's a really welcoming place and a welcoming mechanism to be able to tell your story. So I'd encourage people to do that.
I would concur with all of that. One thing I hope people take away from tonight is I do consider the Disability Royal Commission a pretty rare opportunity to get stories of lived experience on the record, and also to have that belief that things can change and things can improve. It took me quite a while to get around to making a submission. And even just the idea that tonight was coming was a motivation, because I can't talk about it if I haven't done it. So I have made a submission talking about my son and being his carer. And I definitely went through a range of emotions when I did it, because I was reflective. I was looking back at our journey so far. Parts of it made me quite sad. Parts of it made me quite hopeful. But I'm really glad that I did it. I did have the ideas in my head for quite a while. Once I actually sat down to write it, it only took me about an hour. It's probably about a page. And I felt like I had honoured the people who I would say campaigned for a long time to get this Disability Royal Commission. Yes, I'm very glad that I did it. And there's really no right or wrong way of creating your submission. So I did something in writing. It can be long, can be short, can be a couple of points. You might submit your story once, but you could also keep adding information. You might choose to tell multiple stories. And our service and other services are here really to help you in a way that works for you. And very importantly, the Disability Royal Commission is closing at the end of December. And we're going to post some key dates in the chat, and we'll repeat them at the end of the webinar. Another question, and I'll ask you first, Jo. Is there one thing that you would like to see improve for carers, and what would it be?
Oh, great question. I think that it's important that those who are not carers see that the people that we care for and about are not a burden. And I think, Jenny, you talk about that. It's in your, it's just in your heart, isn't it? It's you're going to do this. It's not something that people should feel sorry for us for. It enriches our lives, and it's a really important part of who we are, and those relationships are really important. But I think carers, there needs to be acknowledgement that carers are really tired and they really need support. Sympathy probably doesn't really help. Some support would be good. And it's not just physical support. I think for me and my family, it's it's a jungle out there in terms of understanding the systems. And I'm someone who, I'm a disability scholar. I study this. This is, and I find the bureaucracy and navigating the system so exhausting and disempowering, and something that makes, causes stress, causes arguments between my family members. It's a problem, and we really, I guess that's the most important thing that I'd like people to know, is that we really need a clearer system and supports.
Very comprehensive answer, thank you. Jenny, what would you like to see improve for carers?
I completely agree. I think there are a lot of obstacles that make caring harder than it should be, and more support would be great around that. I guess, yes, understanding on a larger scale with systems, but I also am really big for understanding of the individual carers. Like I'm a big believer in increasing awareness and education, understanding around the intersections of various identities and how it shapes the care experience. I mean, I touched on the tip of the iceberg on my experience alone, and I think it's really important to see emerging and increasing acknowledgement of carers. However, it'd be great to hear, just have those nuanced voices come through. Yeah.
I'm going to answer the question myself. So I'm lucky that I've got lots of support, and I fully always acknowledge, like, fantastic parents, are my main supports. One thing I've noticed from talking to carers in my job is that a lot of carers want more or any respite. And I think that probably comes back to Joe's point, when we are tired. It is, we don't want sympathy, but we want support. And I get the sense that a lot of people struggle to find quality respite. So that's one thing I would change. And we're going to put the links to Carers Gateway and Little Dreamers in the chat. And we'll also email them out to everybody who attended today. So just recognising, and I think Carers Week probably highlights this, but there are things available. So we would encourage you to check out Carers Gateway and Little Dreamers. So our final official question, and then we can get on to other questions that might have come along. And I'm going to ask Joe first. As carers, we need to care for ourselves. So who cares for the carers, if not us? What do you do for self-care, and what's your top tip?
Oh, wow. Look, I'm lucky in that, well, not necessarily lucky, but the people that I support, I don't live with. So I have my own family unit to come home to, and that's really helpful for me. But I think my number one tip is to, and I know you all know this, it's you live it. You aren't alone. It's really important to seek support. There is no point in being a martyr. There really is no point, because that doesn't help you, and it certainly doesn't help the person that you are caring for and about, and it doesn't help anyone. So yeah, don't be a martyr, is what I would say.
Good advice. Jenny?
Echoing what Joe said, I agree that drawing on your support network is really important. Both, your informal, your friends, your family, as well as your formal supports can really make a big difference. I find sometimes having to say things out loud can take a lot of pressure off my shoulders, but also means that I have to make sense of my thoughts enough for another person to understand. And sometimes our thoughts do feel bigger in our heads than out loud. And it's an opportunity for connection and understanding with those around us as well. And maybe on a different note, I'm also awful time out for yourself. We're really good as carers to forget to look after ourselves. And my personal favorite is spending time with my dog. I think they're really great, soothing companions. So yeah, if anyone's got a fur baby, all for that for self-care.
I've become pretty good at making the most of pockets of time. So, we can think that self-care means, you have to have a whole day. That's never going to happen. So, but if pockets of time arrive, or you can shove them in, I would go for a walk. I'd love to go out for coffee. I remind myself often that I'm doing the best I can. Which is probably true for all carers, and not really aiming for perfection in anything. That never comes to a good end. And I definitely ask for help, as my mum and dad could attest. So they're amazing grandparents, not just with my child with a disability, but all my kids. So the support, that's a privilege to have that support. And I try to look for the humor even in tricky situations, like not take things too seriously. So my beautiful autistic son, really work on making him laugh. It's very satisfying. And really, he would tell you that I've got lots of bad mum jokes, but it's worth it. All right, so I now have to look at what's coming in the chat, I think. So we have received some questions, and Kim and Fiona behind the scenes are making this hopefully seem pretty seamless. I'm going to go first question, which I'm going to throw to Jenny. This question came through Eventbrite. It's a good question. How can workplaces best support their employees when they are the primary carer?
So I was actually talking to someone from Carers New South Wales a couple of months ago. They were doing a big push for like unpaid leave options for carers if they need to take it, and ensuring that they maintain their job security. So if you need to take unpaid, particularly unplanned leave, that you still have work to come back to when you're ready for that. I think that's really important. Unfortunately, with that push, it was limited in the sense that they were specific to primary carers of older people. So, of course, there's a lot of room to broaden the scope of, like, what's the definition of a carer is much more than just older people. I guess on the other hand, in terms of workplaces, a lot more education about what a carer is, what kind of supports are out there. There are plenty of hidden carers in the workplace. I work in a caring profession, and I can tell you so many people who don't self-identify as carers, even though they work with carers every day. And in particular with education to employees, there will be more understanding. And I would say a big target in that education would be managers, who have the final say a lot of the times in leave approvals and supports in the workplaces. So having those people with that authority have a better understanding, hopefully facilitating compassion and empathy, that would be really important in the workplace.
Thank you. Sorry, there's a motorbike. I keep putting myself on and off mute. Joe, another question that came through beforehand that maybe you could comment on. So in relation to support workers, how do you think that they can best support and collaborate with carers?
Oh, what a great question. I wonder if you're out there. Yeah, that is a great question. For me, I think it's tricky, because boundaries are really important, and I understand that. However, in my experience of, I'm a bit old now, a few years of doing this, I really like to become friends with the support people who are in my family's life. And it's not always you know, a very close friendship, but just trying to develop a genuine relationship and care for that person as well. You know, find out who they are, what are their kids' names maybe, or what are their stresses, you know, because if they're half an hour late for a shift, that causes a lot of stress on you, and you can choose to get really angry, or, you know, because it really messes things up, or you can just, you know, find out what went wrong, what went wrong here. And, you know, of course, if people are not going to, you know, you don't want people to take advantage, but I think that really helps when you have a genuine relationship within that circle. And I also think what helps is if we can, you know, conflict is part of life, but conflict really makes it difficult in terms of getting the job done. And so that's what I try to do, is to have, you know, be a bit more flexible in those relationships.
That makes you sound very wise, Jo.
Yeah, maybe a bit naive in terms of, yeah, right. But it's
now I'm going to go to, I think, some questions that have come in while we've been chatting. So that's good. I'm going to read the first one out. I have an NDIS provider whom I have had difficult challenges with over the years for my daughter's care as a guardian. Michelle, you can note how we can assist with the referral for support. I'm not doing a great job reading this. So the query or the comment is, yeah, someone who is a guardian for their daughter and they've had difficult challenges with an NDIS provider over the years. All right. So I think we'll provide some information in the chat. We also have a webinar available on our YouTube channel, which is all about dealing with the NDIS. It does come up a lot at Your Story. Potentially, it's also a story to share with the Disability Royal Commission. But yeah, certainly at Your Story, as well as helping people share their stories, we can provide referrals, we can provide legal information and legal advice. So that might be a good reason to get in contact with us. The next question: how do we get more support when there is very little out there in the community, or not many people who want to be formal paid carers or support workers? The good question. The systemic problem here is that there are not enough people who want to work in disability. Those of us carers who have no informal supports are drowning. So what do we do? Yeah, good question. And as someone who I guess is lucky to have those informal supports, yeah, that's difficult. What would you say about that, Jo or Jenny?
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, it's easy to say talk to the Commission, but I would say that, please, you know, tell your story. This is, as Michelle says, this is a rare opportunity that will not come around again, probably in our lifetime. So this is the chance to tell those stories, to say I'm drowning because I don't have informal supports in my life. Let's hope that those of us who are training disability professionals, you know, we can continue to do that, so we have a larger pool of people. I also think that you know, we need to really sell this role as an enjoyable role. It's not something that is, you know, is I mean, of course it's hard work sometimes, but it's so amazing. And I think, you know, we need to let people know that this is you're absolutely right, Maura. We need so many more supporters. So it's about nurturing our young ones. And, you know, both my kids have to do disability support work, whether they like it or not. So no, you're not working at McDonald's, you're doing disability support work. So but they do, they love it. And it's certainly you know, trying to get people more involved and understanding that it's a great thing to do. But Maura, yeah, my heart goes out to you.
Jenny?
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge, like I'm from Sydney Metro, you know, the supports I have available to me are very different to people who are living in, say, rural, remote areas. So to the person who asked the question, I'm not sure what exactly that looks like, but I know even in metro areas, people struggle. And so part of it is, I don't think there's an easy answer and how exactly that can change. A lot of that is a systemic thing: funding, education, training, resources. And I think a big thing is the conversation around disability and healthcare is so often about cost cutting and reducing the burden on the health system. But when we look at the fact that things like NDIS, these are proactive supports that improve a person's quality of life. They keep people out of institutions, out of hospitals, keeping them at home where they have, they're around the supports, they have goals around going to work if they want to. Those are a lot more meaningful and create a better society. And so actually there's plenty of statistics about how much carers save the healthcare system. And if we start looking at those things instead of the dollar figure that gets spent on NDIS, what about how much it saves? Like one night in a hospital bed is so much more than to be able to fund for supports at home. So I think there needs to be a bit of a shake up with how, politicians and those sort of policymakers look at these sorts of things as if they're really just looking at Excel spreadsheets and cutting costs, because there's so much more to our lives with people with disabilities and the families and friends around them than just the dollar figure. So that's what I would say.
Very impressive answer. I would pick up there, Jenny, on I think they call it postcode injustice or postcode discrimination. Like it definitely comes up with people sharing their stories. Very, I guess the quality, but perhaps also the choice of service providers, in a city compared to being somewhere remote, and they might feel like there's no choice. I think they are definitely stories worth sharing. And just also maybe look for people who are whoever asked the question or other people here tonight checking out Carer Gateway. You might find some useful resources there. And then the next one, more of a comment than a question. Comments are good. We need more recognition, and the systems need to change for people with disabilities and carers with financial help with Centrelink. Yeah, so that might be, I guess, the amount of support that carers are eligible for from Centrelink. I know that carers, parents and carers too, can also find it really difficult to deal with Centrelink. I've heard that before.
I can say as a social worker, Centrelink is such a minefield, and every time I speak to carers at work about, financial stress and having to navigate Centrelink, I'm just like, the social workers at Centrelink are literally there to navigate, employed to help navigate like loopholes within Centrelink. It's such the irony of that. And
the irony of that.
So frustrating. It's so frustrating.
I've heard from parents and carers, probably older parents and carers, just the frustrations with the things that you used to be able to do in person, and now you're sort of really pushed online, and that can be very hard for people to, hard to get through, but very hard for people to navigate as well. And someone made the comment, it's kind of like they're pushing the work back onto you that maybe they used to do.
Yeah.
Which again makes me think of Joe's comment that we're tired, because that is tiring. A comment from Facebook. I wouldn't give up my special needs son. He enriches my life so much, but the right support has been difficult to access. Yeah, that sounds very relatable.
Yeah. I think we all learn a lot as carers. You get pushed to your limits sometimes, and there's always room to reflect on why that's happened and what you can do about it in future. But of course, more supports in place gives you a safer place, a safer, supported place to really dig deep about why asking those questions. Yeah.
Now, this is good advice, Joe, but I'm a mother with a disability and have children with complex disabilities. And no matter how much I ask for help or search for help, I don't get it. When I ask others to lessen the load by providing more support, including the ED, it doesn't come. It sounds good in theory, but it's not happening in my world. And I know many other parents in my situation.
Yes. And you're navigating the disability system yourself as well. So, you know, Maura, I'm just trying to work out whether you're in a rural place, just from what you've put. I'm going to pronounce it wrongly. You're in a rural country. And I'm wondering whether it's a triple whammy you've got there. You know, you're in a rural area as well, which makes it so difficult.
Well, I said they're from the city in the next bit.
Oh, they are from the city? Oh, great. Okay. Yep. Well, yeah. It's very difficult. I'd really, really encourage you to tell your story. And I know that doesn't relieve what's happening for you right now. I know that. But your story is so important and so powerful.
And it might be too, I mean, it is, there's no easy fix to that question, but if you call our information line and perhaps have an appointment with one of our lawyers, we would also try to connect you with, you know, perhaps a disability advocate, certainly a counsellor. So there's often, I think, maybe more free supports than people realise. And with us, you know, there's no wrong door. So you're very, very welcome to call us.
I love that. There's no wrong door.
Oh, it's very trendy, Joe, that idea.
Is it?
Yeah. but I actually, I don't want to be flippant, but I think that at your story, that is genuinely true. Like, we really do try quite hard to do good referrals, do what we can. But yes, so certainly we wouldn't be saying to someone, "Oh, you shouldn't have called us." If in doubt, please call. Now a nice question here in the chat. I'll go to you first, Jenny. What do you love about being a carer?
I think my brother is so different to me, and maybe that's the privilege of being the youngest son. He's taught me a lot in how he can be so unapologetically himself. You know, he's not afraid to ask for things. He's not afraid to just feel the pure joy in a moment. And I feel like those things feel so simple sometimes, but he really grounds me and reminds me those little things are really, really important. Like, you know, sometimes I'm so in my head trying to plan my day, trying to think of what to do next. And sometimes he just wants me to sit down and play with him. And like, as adults, you lose touch with that side of things, that creative side, that spontaneity. So I love that he reconnects me to that kind of creative, joyful side. I feel like I would be such a boring, serious adult if he wasn't in my life. So that's what I love most about the fact that he's my brother. Yeah.
That is a really beautiful answer.
Really?
As a mum, I always love it when siblings say nice things about siblings. Joe, what would you say you love about being a carer?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think, well, what do I love? I think the variety. I mean, the women in my life who I care for are very different in their needs. You know, when Mum had her spinal cord injury, it was a very different role because you know, it was more physical. But with my sister, I think I really do love. It's very similar to you, I guess. It's Jenny. It's that ability that she has to make me realize that my busyness, that I think I've got the monopoly on busyness, you know, I'm just so important and I've got to do this and this, you know, she doesn't allow me to, you know, indulge in that, I guess. It's sort of like, I want to talk to you and I'll talk to you now and I will take, you know, an hour and a half of your time, whether you like it or not. And I don't really care. I don't care if I've got an important lecture to give or whatever. It's not. So I think that that's really important for me, and it's a real gift.
I can relate to both of your answers. My son, he's about to turn 10 and he's got autism. And I think our family is different and better off for Davey and his autism. I think it's been good for my other kids. I think it teaches them that we're all different. You know, we've all got strengths, we've all got weaknesses. We are, you know, we all love each other and we take care of each other. And he's just a very sweet, quirky kid. Yes. Now I'm going to have another quick look at the chat. So we've got final question. It says, how confident is the Disability Royal Commission that their findings will be implemented by this current federal government? Do you think the electorate still has an appetite for royal commissions or regards them as a process option rather than an outcome? Very, very big, juicy questions, I would say, there. And I guess we wait and see. So I always say to people to take the optimistic approach. The government has invested a lot of money and a lot of time in this Disability Royal Commission, and I think that's for good reasons. Yeah, and there are a few Royal Commissions around, but they do achieve some good things. Maybe I could ask you, Jenny and Joe, before we finish, do you think that community attitudes are changing?
Yes.
Yes. Good.
I really do. I really, really do. And it's not just about language. I think, you know, we're seeing so much more inclusion, and I think that helps carers in the long run. You know, I think about when I was a child in the 70s, watching my parents in their role, it was really, really difficult because, well, you know, they were, you know, there was a lot of pressure around institutionalization at that time. And my sister was born in the 60s, and, you know, we've come a long, long way, you know, and it is hard. It was hard, very hard, because, you know, you just, in terms of that inclusion, you didn't have the community that understood. It was more, you know, you kept your family unit to yourself. But now, you know, I watch families like yours, Michelle, where, you know, everything goes. We're all out there. We're all part of this community, and the community and the village can help support that. So I do think we've come a long, long way in the last, what are we, 60 years or so. The deinstitutionalization movement was phenomenal. It's we still got a long way to go, obviously, but it's not, you know, people aren't isolated as much as they were.
Jenny?
I think it's not perfect. I think there will always be room for improvement. And we can see a lot of attitudes, community attitudes are changing about a number of subjects. And one of those things is disability. You know, you can extend that more broadly to think about gender and you know, rights of certain minority groups and all those sorts of things. And part of that is because the accessibility of information has made a really big difference. Media representation has really changed. I think about, you know, my generation, you go on Netflix and there's so many shows with like people with diverse abilities, and that's really, really important because it's normalizing these things. And so if people aren't stigmatizing disability in the same way, or those attitudes are changing, of course attitudes towards real life people with disabilities and carers changes as well. And so I do think there is emerging improvement, but I of course recognize those attitudes can vary depending on what it's about, or certain communities. Like it's not all even playing field with that change. But I do like to maintain a hopeful outlook. I think things like this, it's a platform for better understanding. There are more organizations like Little Dreamers to support people out there. So yeah, I do think things are changing for the better, slowly but surely.
I would agree, slowly but surely, and that might also be the way that it goes with the Disability Royal Commission. I think we could say that they definitely will make recommendations, and that will send an important message to the Australian community about what it will take to create a safe country for people with disabilities, what it will take to stop the mistreatment that we see. Now I feel like I said final question, and I'm getting in one more question. And I think I'll be able to answer this one. So the question is, I'm concerned about people finding out I've shared my story with the Royal Commission. Is there a way I can do it confidentially? So that the short and sweet answer is yes. But definitely something that Your Story Disability Legal Support can talk to you about, the different choices you make when you share a story, the different ways you can do it but still feel safe and still feel reassured. So you could definitely give us a call about that. So I want to say a big thank you to Jenny and Joe for your time, for sharing your experiences. Just a lovely chat about our different caring roles that we've got. So thank you very much. What else do I want to do? Let me see, look at these notes. I also want to thank our Auslan interpreters, and I want to thank our captioner. So that's that's Lee and Sean and Danny. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the two people at Your Story that are behind the scenes that probably don't get thanked as often as they should, Kim and Fiona. So yeah, they do all the tech, and I just had to turn up and really do a bit of talking. And then a couple of final points on the Royal Commission. So as you've hopefully gathered, free support is available for people that want to share a story and share their ideas for change with the Disability Royal Commission. And most importantly, that closing date of the 31st of December. So your story has to reach the Disability Royal Commission by then. We would love to hear from you. You can complete a survey by scanning the QR code that you can see on the screen, or by following the link that appears on the screen at the end of the webinar. It includes a question for carers who might have a loved one residing in a group home, or SIL, and that might be respite and or longer term. This is because we're really keen to help people tell stories about group homes, and give you any support we can to share those kind of stories. A recording of this webinar will be available on the Your Story Facebook page, and we'll also add it to YouTube in the coming weeks, and email that to anyone who's been registered, along with all the links that have been placed in the chat, and we'll answer any questions that we didn't get to. If this webinar has raised any concerns for you, free counselling is available, and that's by calling Blue Knot on 1800 421 468. And the survey is also in the chat. We do really value feedback. We'd love to know what you think. If you've got any questions, that would be great. And I think that's a wrap. And our details are in the chat. But yeah, our information line is 1800 77 1800. Email yourstory.disability@legalaid.qld.gov.au. Thanks very much.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jenny.